about to begin one of the busiest sections of gaming that I think I have ever seen. With many neck deep in Baldur's Gate 3 at the moment and Starfield rapidly approaching in the coming weeks, let's also not forget about Forza Motorsports, Liza P, Alan Wake 2, Assassin's Creed Mirage, and a little game called Spider-Man 2. With Immortals of Aveum having been released on August 22nd, it is surely going to be a game that gets eaten up in this massive list of games, where some just might not have the cash for the game or the time, as there are many great offerings this fall, and I think this is one that you should consider. When you think of an FPS shooter, your mind will usually gravitate towards the likes of Call of Duty, Battlefield, Apex Legends, Valorant, and many more. A majority of the time, you're talking about the multiplayer components of these games, as the discussions are rarely focused on the single-player aspects. And I bring this up as an FPS player games are sort of a dying breed, or have died off recently and have begun to make a resurgence, with the likes of Doom 2016 and its sequel, Doom Eternal, Ghostwire Tokyo, and now Immortals of Aveum. Immortals of Aveum is an FPS Magic adventure game developed by a recently formed startup by the name of Ascendant Studios, comprised of a number of developers from former AAA studios that have worked on games like Call of Duty, Battlefield, Dead Space, and a few members of the Telltale series as well. Now I know you're all here to learn more about the game and the world of Aveum. I do want to give a big shout out to EA and Ascendant Studios for gifting me a copy of this game, so big thanks to them for making this review possible, and let's dive into it.
Then the Everwar is over.
Over? As in he takes over Lucium?
As in, he takes over everything.
Early on, you can tell that a lot of time and effort was put into the world building of Immortals of Aveum. It's quite a lot to take in at first, as you're getting hit with a lot of new techno jargon and buzzwords that really won't mean anything until much later in the game. You do start the game out playing as Jack, a low-life street-level kid that lives his kind of day-to-day life with a group of friends in the underbelly of a massive bridge. Now, the first mission serves as your tutorial for the movement and the basic shooting mechanics, or should I say, magic mechanics. Magic is freely wielded in this game by mostly everyone in the world. Some have the ability to do small menial tasks, while others can control one of the three forces of magic that exist in this world. And it isn't until a tragic event occurs that you are enlisted into the Everwar, a battle between the Immortals, who are the good guys, and the enemy Rasharnian, the evil guys, forces over full and total control over magic itself. And just little note, the cutscenes that do illustrate these battles early on are pretty impressive, and for a studio of their size and this being their first game, I gotta give them a little props there. And a lot of the backdrops here are gorgeous as you move throughout the campaign as well. Now, I won't go too much into the nitty-gritty of the story, as that is going to take you roughly about 10 to 15 hours to finish, but we can talk a little more about the characters that appear throughout your playthrough, as well as our main character, Jack, who is played by Dave Barnett. He does give a pretty solid performance as a scarred but hopeful protagonist who just wants to do the right thing and crack a few jokes along the way. Jack, unlike other magic wielders, has the ability to harness all three magic colors simultaneously and swap between them. In lore terms, this is classified as being a Triarch mage, making him one of the most powerful members of the Immortals. Leading and guiding the Immortals is your commander, Grand Magnus Kirkin, who is played by the awesome and incredibly talented Gina Torres of Suits and Destiny fame. Genuinely don't think that she's ever delivered a bad performance, and she once again nails it here. And there are a few other characters that you will meet across the game, but Jack and Kirkin are going to be the two that you're interacting with the most, and at times butting heads. You also have the field commander Zendra, who is the commander of the troops, and Devin, who is your tactical expert, who isn't much one for field work. And to round it all out, we have the big bad Sandrax, who's honestly, he's your typical run-of-the-mill bad guy. I loved his armor and his design, and the performance from the actor was pretty good, so I do got to give them props there as well. And there is a heavy mentor vibe that you kind of get from the two of Kirkin and Jack together, where she tries to not let her guard down, but she does unfortunately let it flow through in certain dialogue options and choices. And I do want to circle back to the dialogue that I mentioned, because there are segments of the game where you're given dialogue options. Now, most of these, I believe, are optional and meant to just give you more context to the current situation. While not integral, it is still nice to have that level of depth. The story isn't going to be something to reinvent the wheel, but it does offer you enough deviation and variety that it will keep most people happy, as it did throughout my playthrough. While not all the jokes are going to land, there are some that land, and when they do, they land.
So tell me, sir, when did you say to yourself, hey, bigotry, it's not really so bad, is it?
I have to make a far call. Are you referring, Initiate, to why I think the unforeseen are a curse?
Yep.
Next up, we're going to talk about the gameplay and spells. Unlike most FPS games, Immortals of Aveum uses magic through the use of sigils that are fashioned around the wrist as your weapons of choice. With the player being able to cycle between one of the three colors like previously mentioned, you can change them from the blue spell, which is more attributed to a pistol or a DMR, with the red spell being more linked to that of a shotgun with its powerful blast that only works when you're within close proximity to your enemies. Then the green spell, which serves as more of a rapid fire SMG. Now each of these three colors will have different variations that will further modify how they perform and act in combat. Personally, one of the biggest issues that I have with these spells wasn't how they felt, but it's more so how you selected them and used them in the game. Because the game unfortunately doesn't offer a weapon wheel, and when playing on mouse and keyboard, you do have to scroll up and or down to get one of the three spells, and sometimes in the heat of combat, if you over scroll or whatever, you'll constantly be fumbling back and forth between those spell options. Now you do get a bonus much like in Destiny 2. In Immortals of Aveum, if you match the shield color of the enemy that you're firing at with one of the three colors, it will give you a little bit of bonus damage and a little bit of bonus stun as well. And some enemies are actually designed around this entire concept and will require you to use those spells in combination to take them down. The game does boast somewhere upwards of 80 spells and different variations between your three different colors for you to craft, loot, and find as you make your way across the map on your playthrough. And I say map because this isn't your traditional FPS game in the sense like Call of Duty or Battlefield, where you load into a mission and then progress to a certain point and have that mission be over. Instead, the world of Aveum is built something more akin to the recent God of War games or Jedi games from Respawn, where you have these giant maps and worlds that are strung together to create the overall experience. Now, it does take a few missions till the game opens up, but once you do, you will see that there is a decent sized area to move about with some hidden puzzles and enemy camps scattered across the land. Nothing new, but still different when you look at this type of genre and what they're known for. And to move around the environment, the game gives you a grappling hook to kind of aid the traversal and allow you to hook onto your enemies and designated points to pull yourself towards them. Best advice I can say is if you've played Doom Eternal and you've used the meat hook shotgun with the grappling hook, that's the best sort of movement comparison that I can give you. One of the things this game does differently than Doom is the upgrading gear system. Yes, this game has a gear system, but it's not like something that you would find in most open world RPGs or looters. While it does have a colored tier system, it's not something where you will be min-maxing your loot. The loot is very simple in the sense that you're either buffing one of your three colors of magic or special abilities that you unlock with one of your 1 through 6 keys, with simple buffs like dealing more damage or faster reload times. Then you also have a skill tree for each of the three colors of magic that you have, and you probably guessed it by speccing in more and more points into one color, you will notice a decent bump in damage and reload speed. Very simple upgrade system in my opinion, which is a treat as the game doesn't really need anything fancy, but it does offer enough depth to allow you to build into a certain playstyle or certain magic. I did want to mention technical aspects here a little bit. Immortals of Aveum is going to be among the first games to be released that is using the Unreal 5 engine, with Fortnite being the first game to use it and then last month Remnant 2. With that being said, it was bound to come off as a graphically demanding game with minimum requirements being a 2080 Super in the graphics card department. With that in mind, I reviewed this with a 4080, and pre and post launch of the game, the performance was honestly all over the place. Early on, I was really trying to push the game for all of its graphical settings with everything turned up to ultra and max, and I was running it without DLSS, and that at 2K was not working. Wasn't until I dropped some frames down, dropped a few settings down, and then turned DLSS on that I was really able to get a smooth and steady frame rate. I did notice that it did get choppy in some boss fights, especially when there's a lot of particle effects, and there are a lot of them in this game. So if you are on PC, it might be best to hold off for a bit to maybe get things a little smoothed out, or if you've got a beefy system, you can go ahead and try to run it, but might even consider picking this up on console if that's your thing. For my closing and final statements, I would say that I'm happy that I had the opportunity to review and play this game ahead of its release before the madness of September and October hits that is video game releases, because I do sadly believe this is going to get buried in those releases of games, and that is a big bummer for more than one reason in my book. EA did the same exact thing to Titanfall 2 back in 2016, putting it out the week after Battlefield 1 and the week before the yearly release of Call of Duty. And I mention this because this upcoming window will for sure hurt the sales and therefore reception for what I think is a pretty fun FPS game. Yeah, it might not win any awards, but it is something enjoyable from the story and the combat perspective. Might not be worth the $60 depending on who you ask, but if you sign up for EA Play Pro for 1 month, play it only on there, it's only going to run you about 15 bucks, and for that price, hell yeah, I think it's worth it. Add this one to your backlog as something you would visit down the road as some time frees up. Ascendant Studios really came out swinging in its debut title, and I think they landed pretty good here. While I'm not sure if EA thinks that it will be sequel worthy, only time will tell. Speaking of time, I'm going to wrap it up here. So if you did make it this far, thank you for sticking around. And once again, thank you to Ascendant Studios for the code, and this has been my review of Immortals of Aveum. Thank you for watching.
Or turn you into a weapon against Rasharn.
Back up. Option A was to kill me?